This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have some concerning news in the aftermath of an edict that was put out by Donald Trump. I'm going to put his post right up here on the screen. I have instructed our Department of Commerce to immediately begin work on a new and highly accurate census based on modern-day facts and figures, and importantly, using the results and information gained from the presidential election of 24. People who are in our country illegally will not be counted in the census. And then, of course, the usual thank you for your attention to this matter, which makes it official as a presidential edict. Mark, first and foremost, and I know that we always engage in this same question, which is the Constitution is clear about who can be counted in the census. It's clear about how often the census has to occur. And then you have Donald Trump saying that he's going to do something that is completely antithetical to what is laid out in the U.S. Constitution. And so when you have these two things where the Constitution says one thing, Trump says another, how do you reconcile the two?
Well, you don't, right? I mean, what Donald Trump is doing here is either trying to violate the Constitution, or he's ignorant of the Constitution, doesn't care, or it was just like he saw something on Fox News that irritated him, so he decided to fire off social media posts. Like any one of those three is possible. But Brian, let's just level set on a couple of things. The first is that, as you point out, the U.S. Constitution is clear in Article 1. Now, I realize Donald Trump doesn't spend a lot of time perusing the actual Constitution, but if he did, what he'd find is that it requires the enumeration of all people, right? So it's not, he doesn't get to pick and choose who gets counted.
Right. I believe the exact verbiage is whole persons, if I'm not mistaken.
That's exactly right. That's the phrase that is used in the Constitution that has been interpreted to mean everyone, right? So it doesn't matter immigration status. It doesn't matter, nothing matters, right? It's just you count everyone.
Right.
The second thing is, as you point out, the Constitution makes clear that this is a decennial process. This takes place every 10 years. We have that taking place in the year starting with zero or ending with zero, depending on, I guess, whether you view that as the first or the last day of the decade. Please don't leave comments on that. But it was last done in 2020. It'll next be done in 2030. The third thing that I think is worth noting, though, in this rambling, bizarre social media post is he mentions that it needs to be done somehow related to the results of the 2024 election, which is neither an enumeration and accounting of all persons, nor would it have anything to do with a census to be taken.
Yeah.
So what is not clear to me, and I genuinely mean this, is he suggesting that for 2030, this is what he wants to see done at the time of the next decennial census? Is it something that he thinks needs to be done mid-cycle, which is the way I think you interpret it, and frankly, I think that is what he intends, that it's like something done like in 2025 or 2026 in violation of the Constitution? And if that's the case, Brian, I'll throw this back to you. What exactly does the 2024 election have to do with anything?
Well, that part, I have no idea. That was going to be my next question to you, because I don't understand what new facts and figures were gained from the presidential election. But what I think we're seeing a pattern of here, and let me know if you agree with this, is we're seeing every method he has at his disposal to try and ensure that he has the House in 2024. And so he's going into these states in 2026. And so he's going into these states like Texas. We've heard from Missouri. J.D. Vance is going into Indiana. We now heard from Ron DeSantis that he's looking to redraw those maps in Florida. And so that's one avenue that they can get to ensure that they keep the House by just rigging the maps even further, gerrymandering them even further. And now
before you leave that, can I just point something out that I think people need to think about? What a pathetic figure J.D. Vance is. I mean, he's the vice president of the United States. He has been tasked with going to Indiana to convince them to gerrymander.
Yeah.
Literally, that's what the vice president of the United States is doing. Yeah. I mean, last I heard, he was going to be convening a special meeting to figure out how to contain the fallout from the Epstein files.
Yeah, he's tasked on pedophile cover-up. That is the big job that's gonna prepare J.D. Vance to be the heir apparent in the Republican Party. That he was able to adequately hide his boss's involvement in a pedophile ring.
Right, and now to compound that, he gets to go to Indiana to convince Republicans in Indiana to gerrymander. Yeah. I can't look past the fact that J.D. Vance was a small man Like he was never, the people who said that he had some like towering intellect or was, somehow this genius, that
Right.
was always bullshit. But he has turned out to be an even smaller man than I
Yeah.
than I thought.
So there is that one avenue where they're trying to just get the states to rig the game in their favor, but also by engaging in a mid-cycle redistricting, what that would allow is basically reapportionment. And so if they don't count undocumented immigrants, even though those are whole persons and that would abide by the Constitution, if they opt not to count these people illegally, then that would mean that California would lose a bunch of seats. That's another avenue that these Republicans can take, that Donald Trump could take to ensure that the amount of seats that are allocated to certain states would go down in Democratic states and get reapportioned to Republican states. And so he's really trying throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks approach to all of this in his desperation to ensure that he keeps both houses of Congress, which, look, I don't need to explain to you why having both houses of Congress as we head toward 2028 presidential election is going to be especially important, especially as it relates to certification and blocking certain votes, and very similar to what we saw in 2020.
Yeah, so I want everyone to pay attention to this next thing really, really carefully. Donald Trump is doing this not because he thinks he can pull it off. Like even logistically pulling off another census between now and 2026 would be nearly impossible. Pulling it off and then having a reapportionment. Pulling it off and then every state having to do redistricting, because if you take away seats or add seats, you have to redistrict the whole state,
Yeah.
right? Like none of that is going to happen. None of it would be legal and none of it's even possible. So ask yourself, what is Donald Trump up to? This is what he's up to. He is laying the groundwork to try to steal the 2026 elections. Why is the Department of Justice collecting individual voter data on every American? Why are they going to all 50 states? Why is the criminal division of the Department of Justice going to all 50 states to try to get the voter files so they know where you live, what your social security number is, whether you're a registered Democrat or Republican, what elections you have voted in? Why are they collecting all of that information? Why is he now saying we need this massive census and reapportionment? Why does he tie it to 2024? I'll tell you why. Because when Republicans lose in 2026, he wants to be able to say, you see, we lost because we were cheated. We lost because the census was rigged. We lost because people who are not eligible to vote voted. We lost, and there are all these irregularities. So everyone needs to be paying attention to this YouTube channel, hopefully the Democracy Docket YouTube channel as well, because Brian and I cover this stuff and hopefully help you connect why what Donald Trump is doing around the census actually ties to what the Department of Justice is doing around voter lists.
I think that's completely spot on, and I think it's especially important to recognize this stuff as it's happening, because he relies on being able to lie to people, to give them some pretext to be able to think that there was some wrongdoing, some nefarious behavior. But it starts right here. I mean, we are seeing the beginnings of that right now when he comes forward and starts to lay the groundwork, and he'll do it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to the point where he really grooms his supporters into believing something that is a complete fiction, something that he's made up out of whole cloth is something that's actually happening, which raises this question that I have, and that is that, look, I understand this as him giving himself a pretext to be able to cry foul in the next election, but moving forward, do you think that this specifically, if we were to just isolate this specific issue, is it kind of in the same ballpark? I guess legally speaking, does it have as much weight behind it as, his effort to eliminate birthright citizenship, which of course was doomed from the very beginning? It hasn't survived a single legal challenge in court. And so do you expect, this specific issue? Yes, he's going to use this to cry foul in the election. And there's a lot of danger, obviously, after January 6th in manipulating an entire half of the U.S. population into believing something that is patently untrue. But if we isolate this issue as a legal matter, is this very much in the same ballpark as birthright citizenship, which is to say, not going to get anywhere in the courts?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Look, both of them have one thing in common, which is that the plain text of the Constitution is very clear, and Donald Trump wants to do something that is settled that he can't do. I mean, in both cases, it is not just the plain text of the Constitution, but actually the Supreme Court in both instances have sort of weighed in on these two issues before. And so he's not going to get anywhere with this. But In both instances, what he is able to do is use the defeat that he suffers to sow chaos, to use the defeat that he suffers to therefore claim that something nefarious is happening. In the case of birthright citizenship, he can say, you see, I closed the southern border, I did all these things, but the problem at the end was that the courts, the reason why it's not solved, right, is because of the
Right.
courts. They wouldn't uphold this peace. In this instance, when he loses the control of the Congress in 2026, he's going to point back to this and he's going to argue that this is a reason why the election results shouldn't be honored. And I think we all need to be really clear-eyed about this. We are going to have elections. Like dictators love elections. The question is how fair and free are they, and how much will Donald Trump respect the outcome of them? Unfortunately, his track record on both fronts is really poor. On the respecting the outcome, it led to a deadly insurrection in the nation's capital in 2020. So I think we all need to be very realistic about the game that he's playing.
What would your message to folks out there be? And I'm talking about independents and Trump voters especially, because I think those in the pro-democracy coalition are on board with your message. But in light of what happened on January 6th, and in advance of Trump laying the groundwork to do something very similar in 2026 and ultimately 2028, knowing what we know now, having a little bit more insight into folks' mindsets and also how persuasive Trump can be with his lies, what would your message to these folks be?
Yeah, so look, my message to independents and to Republicans is that you stand to benefit from the rule of law. Like you want an economy that functions. Well, one of the reasons why our economy functions is because there is rule of law, because the government has to follow certain rules. And if the government can just pick winners and losers, sure, today maybe you'll like the president and he'll pick the winners that you like and he'll punish the losers who you dislike. But the next president maybe goes the other way, and then you're on the losing end of that. And so the beauty of American democracy is that we have free and fair elections. We have rule of law. And so sometimes, Congress passes legislation and the president signs it and you are happier, and sometimes you're less happy. But then there is an opportunity when your preferred candidate takes office for them to make adjustments the other way. What Donald Trump is doing by undermining free and fair elections, what Donald Trump is doing by undermining confidence in the rule of law and by disregarding the Constitution, is setting up a system in which we no longer operate in that rule of law framework, in which you start to just have power for power's sake. And Donald Trump won't live forever. Donald Trump won't be in office more than another 3 years. And so ask yourself, is it really worth it to set aside the 200 plus years that we have had of a peaceful transition of power, of a peaceful democracy, with the obvious exception of the Civil War, which was a bloody failure for the losing side in that case, the South, to reconcile itself with the election of Abraham Lincoln. Is that really the system that we want, where sides can't reconcile themselves and we just expect presidents to punish their enemies, reward their friends? Because I don't think in the end, if you're a Republican or an independent, you're going to be happy with that. You'll be happy with it for some periods of time, and you'll be deeply, deeply unhappy for others.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And look, you have been clear-eyed in making these arguments, and so highly recommend for anybody who's watching right now to not only support Marc's work, but to get his voice out there even more. Please subscribe to Democracy Docket. It's his YouTube channel that he started. Highly recommend that you go ahead and subscribe if you're not yet subscribed. It doesn't cost anything to do so, but it's a great way to support his work and independent media more broadly. I'll put the links to both of our channels right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.